students, my name is Niyati Said and thanks for watching Edupedia Word videos. My topic for the presentation is the third section of breathing and exchange of gases. We'll be focusing on gaseous exchange today. Okay, that means exchange of gases. As we very well know that alveoli, they are the primary site of exchange of gases, right? Exchange of gases also occur between blood and tissues. Oxygen and carbon dioxide, they are exchanged in these sites by simple diffusion, mainly based on pressure concentration gradient. Okay, the solubility of the gases as well as the thickness of the membrane of the alveoli, they are involved in the diffusion, which are also some important factors that can affect the rate of diffusion. Okay, pressure contributed by an individual gas in a mixture of gases is called partial pressure and is represented as PO2, that is partial pressure of oxygen, okay, and PCO2, that is a partial pressure for carbon dioxide. Okay, we'll be getting to know about the partial pressure of these two gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide, in the atmospheric air and the two sites of diffusion later. Okay, gaseous exchange, they occur between alveoli and blood and tissues. Okay, a gradient is present for carbon dioxide in the opposite direction, that is from tissues to blood and blood to alveoli. Okay, as the solubility of CO2 is 20 to 25 times higher than that of O2, the amount of CO2 that can diffuse through the diffusion membrane per unit difference in partial pressure is much higher compared to that of O2. Okay, the diffusion membrane of alveoli, it is made up of three major layers. Okay, please note down, it is first, it is thin squamous epithelium of the alveoli, second is the endothelium of alveolar capillaries, and the third is a basement substance in between them. Okay, however, its total thickness is much less than a millimeter. Therefore, all the factors in our body are favorable for diffusion of O2 from alveoli to tissues and that of carbon dioxide from tissues to alveoli. Okay, now let's see what gaseous exchange is and how it goes about. Gaseous exchange means we need to get oxygen from the air into the blood, right? And we need to remove waste carbon dioxide from the blood into the air. So the moving gases like this is called as gaseous exchange. The alveoli, they are adapted to make gaseous exchange in lungs, which happen easily and efficiently. Okay, now what are the features of the alveoli that helps in the gaseous exchange? First, they give the lungs a really big surface area. Okay, as we know that alveoli, it is like a grape sac like structure. Okay, and they have a moist thin wall and just one cell thick. Okay, they have a lot of tiny blood vessels called capillaries which keep on providing the nourishment. Okay, and the gases, they move by diffusion from where they have the high concentration to where they have the lower concentration. So as we very well know that diffusion, in that the solvent, or you can say the gases here in this context, gases, they move from high concentration to the low concentration. Oxygen diffuses from the air in the alveoli into the blood, and the carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the air in the alveoli. Okay, please remind these two sentences, that oxygen diffuses from the air in the alveoli into the blood, and the carbon dioxide, it diffuses from the blood into the air in the alveoli. Okay, alveoli have a structure specialized for efficient gaseous exchange. Walls are extremely thin. Okay, and they have a very large surface area, as I have told you, in relation to volume. Okay, they are fluid lined that enables gases to dissolve very efficiently. They are surrounded by numerous capillaries which keep on providing the nourishment. Okay, now come to the exchange of gases. As we very well know that alveoli, they are the primary sites of gaseous exchange. O2 and CO2 are exchanged by simple diffusion. It depends on the following factors. First is pressure concentration gradient, second is solubility of gases, third is thickness of membrane, and fourth is surface area of respiratory membrane, that is lungs. Okay, as you can see that inspired area. Okay, suppose this is the body tissues. These are the systematic veins, this is the heart, and this is the pulmonary vein, and this is the alveoli in which air is filled up. Suppose inspired air goes to the alveoli, okay, or the alveolus, where the partial pressure of oxygen is around 104 mm Hg and partial pressure of CO2 is around 40 mm Hg. Okay, in this O2, it goes to the pulmonary vein and it finally goes to the heart. Okay, the right side of the part, and then after processing it goes into the systematic arteries, where systematic arteries, they carry oxygenated blood, where the partial pressure of oxygen just goes down from 104 mm Hg to 95 mm Hg. Okay, and partial pressure of carbon dioxide, it remains same, that is 40 mm Hg. Okay, and then what happens is when it goes through the systematic arteries, it reaches to the body tissue. Okay, it provides oxygen to the body tissues. Okay, so this was the talk about the oxygen. Now what happens in the expired air? Suppose it has filled body tissue, or you can say the systematic artery, it has filled body tissue with the oxygen. So what is the another task? Another task is to remove the carbon dioxide from these body tissues. So body tissue carbon dioxide, it moves from the systematic veins. Please note here that it was the systematic arteries, but now it is a systematic vein which carries the deoxygenated blood. Okay, now you can see that partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the systematic artery was around 40 mm Hg, but here in the systematic vein it increases up to 45 mm Hg, and partial pressure of oxygen, it goes down from 95 mm Hg to 40 mm Hg. Okay, now it goes to the left part of the blood, and finally it reaches the pulmonary artery, and finally to the alveolus, and finally it goes out, or the expired, it becomes as a expired. Okay, now I hope it's clear to all of you. Now moving on forward to the pressure concentration gradient. As I have told you that there are 4 factors on which oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged by simple diffusion, that is pressure concentration gradient. Second is solubility of gases. Third is thickness of membrane. Fourth is surface area of respiratory membrane, that is lungs. Okay, now come to the pressure concentration gradient. The individual pressure of a gas in a gas mixture is called partial pressure. Okay, partial pressure, you can say that it is a particular gas pressure. Okay, the partial pressure of O2 and CO2 are given below. These are respiratory gases, atmospheric air, alveoli, blood which contains deoxygenated, and the blood which is oxygenated, and tissues. So the partial pressure of oxygen in mmHg in atmospheric air is 159, but as it reaches to the alveoli, it gets decreased to 104, and when the blood is deoxygenated, it goes down even to 40 mmHg, and when the blood is oxygenated it reaches to 95 mmHg, and finally in the tissues it goes down to 40 mmHg. Okay, now come to the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Atmospheric air is 0.3 mmHg, alveoli it reaches to 40 mmHg, and in blood oxygenated and deoxygenated it reaches to 40 and 45 respectively, and finally in the tissue the partial pressure in tissue it reaches to 45 mmHg. Okay, now comes the pressure concentration gradient. As I have told you the entire process how it goes, so the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveolar air is greater, that is it is about 104 millimeter Hg, and than in the blood capillaries, which is about 40 mmHg. So oxygen diffuses into the capillary blood. Okay, now what happens with the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in deoxygenated blood, which is greater than that in the alveolus, which is around 40 millimeter Hg. So carbon dioxide it diffuses into alveoli. Okay, I hope it's clear to all of you. Now comes the solubility of gases. Of course, the solubility of carbon dioxide is 20 to 25 times higher than that of oxygen. Okay, so the amount of carbon dioxide that can diffuse through diffusion membrane per unit difference in partial pressure is much higher than that compared of O2. Okay, now comes the thickness of membrane. Of course, as I have told you that it is made up of 3 layers. One is thin squamous epithelium of alveoli, second is endothelium of alveolar capillaries, and third is basement substance between them. Okay, so this is the diffusion membrane, which is made up of 3 layers. Its total thickness is about 0.5 micrometer. It enables easy gas exchange. Okay, this is the alveolar cavity. Okay, this is the basement membrane. This is the red blood cells that move inside it, inside this blood capillary. Okay, and then comes the surface area of respiratory membrane, that is lungs. As we know that the surface area of human lung is equal to tennis court. Presence of alveoli, it increases the surface area of lungs and it increases the gas exchange too. Okay. Now comes the transport of gases. If we talk about oxygen transport, then oxygen transport takes from lungs to tissues. In the physical solution, blood plasma and as a Oxyhaemoglobin. And carbon dioxide transport, it takes place from tissue to lung as carbonic acid, as Carbohaemoglobin, and as bicarbonates. Okay. Now, oxygen transport. Most of the oxygen is transported in a combined state, that is O2 state. Okay, some of the oxygen is present in the solution in the blood. For each deciliter of blood, 4.6 ml oxygen enters the blood in the lungs. Of this, only 0.17 ml remains in the plasma in the solution form. Remaining, it enters the red blood cells or the RBC and combines with the hemoglobin. Okay. The hemoglobin pigment, that is Hb, has an affinity, strong affinity for oxygen. Okay, that's the reason oxygen combines with the iron ions which is present in the hemoglobin. Okay, and in the arteries lining of the lungs, it combines with oxygen and forms HbO2. Okay, when Hb plus O2 combines, then it forms HbO2, which is known as oxyhemoglobin. Okay, and each hemoglobin molecule contains 4 ferrous ions. Okay, this hemoglobin, it contains about 4 ferrous ions. So each hemoglobin molecule can carry a maximum of 4 oxygen molecules. The saturation of the Hb molecule, it totally depends on the amount of the oxygen in the alveolar air. It is found that hemoglobin has more affinity for oxygen under high partial pressure of oxygen and the low temperature and the low acidity conditions. Okay. This is the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Here you can see, if we plot in the x-axis the partial pressure of oxygen and in the y-axis percent saturation of hemoglobin, then how it goes, it goes like a sigmoid curve, okay, at 10 degree, at 20 degree and at 43 degrees Celsius. Means higher the temperature of the normal acidity, it causes hemoglobin to give up oxygen, okay. And this is the partial pressure of O2 when we plot with the percent solution of hemoglobin. Then it shows like at 10 degree it shows lower acidity, at 20 degree it shows normal acidity, and at 43 degrees Celsius it shows high acidity. That means high acidity at normal temperature causes hemoglobin to give up oxygen, okay. However, in the tissues the partial pressure of oxygen is low as it is constantly being used up. Temperature is higher because of metabolic reactions and the acidity is also very high. Under these conditions, the oxyhemoglobin, that is HbO2, gives up its oxygen and forms hemoglobin again. Okay, that means oxyhemoglobin, that is HbO2, it gives up oxygen. That means oxygen is removed from the HbO2. Now what remains is Hb again. So more active the tissue is, lesser is the partial pressure of oxygen. Thus more oxygen is released by the oxyhemoglobin is more in the more active tissues. Okay. Now how it goes about O2 transport? In physical solution, that is blood plasma, about 3% of the oxygen is carried by dissolving in plasma. Okay. Or you can say that hemoglobin is a red colored iron containing pigment that is present in RBCs. O2 can bind with the hemoglobin in a reversible manner to form oxyhemoglobin. And each hemoglobin molecule can carry a maximum of 4 molecules of O2. Binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is primarily related to partial pressure of O2. Partial pressure of CO2, hydrogen ion concentration and temperature are the other factors which can interfere with this binding. And hence the sigmoid curve is obtained when percentage saturation of hemoglobin with O2 is plotted against the partial pressure of oxygen. Okay, which we just read in the previous slide. Okay, as a oxyhemoglobin, around 97% of the O2 is transported by RBC. O2 binds with the hemoglobin in a reversible manner to form oxyhemoglobin. This is called oxygenation. Hb has 4 heme units, so each Hb molecule can carry 4 oxygen molecules. Okay, so Hb4, when it combines with the 4 oxygen molecules at high partial pressure of oxygen and the low partial pressure of carbon dioxide, that is in lungs, it forms Hb4O8. But when high partial pressure of carbon dioxide is there and the low partial pressure of O2 is there in the tissues, then it gets broken down into Hb4 and 4O2. Okay, binding of oxygen depends upon PO2 and CO2, H plus ion concentration and temperature. In alveoli there is high partial pressure of oxygen, low partial pressure of carbon dioxide, and lesser H plus ion concentration and lower temperature. And these factors, they favor the formation of oxyhemoglobin. Okay, and every 100 ml of oxygenated blood can deliver around 5 ml of oxygen to the tissue under normal physiological conditions. This is a sigmoid curve when it is plotted against percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen with the partial pressure of oxygen. It is a sigmoid curve obtained when percentage saturation of Hb with O2 is plotted against the PO2. It is used to study the effect of factors like P, CO2, H plus concentration, etc. on binding of oxygen with hemoglobin. Okay. Now come to the carbon dioxide transport. Carbon dioxide is transported in 3 different forms: dissolved gases, bicarbonates, and Carbohaemoglobin molecules. Okay, about 3.7 ml of carbon dioxide it enters each 100 ml of blood. A small amount in the plasma is transported in the dissolved form. Most of the carbon dioxide it enters the red blood cells. Of the gas entering the RBC, 70% is converted to bicarbonate ions, and remaining 30% it forms Carbohaemoglobin. Okay, now let's see how formation of bicarbonates takes place. Carbon dioxide first combines with the water to form carboxylic acid in presence of zinc and enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. Okay, carboxylic acid is then split into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. Most of the bicarbonate ions come out of the RBC and are transported by the blood plasma. So when CO2 combines with the water, it forms H2CO3, which is a carbonic acid, and thus it breaks down to form hydrogen ion and HCO3 minus, that is bicarbonate ion. Okay. In the lungs, the reverse reaction takes place and the hemoglobin gives up the hydrogen ion, which combines with the bicarbonate to form a carboxylic acid, that is H plus HCO3 minus, it gives HCO3, which again on splitting gives water and carbon dioxide. This forms carbon dioxide and water. Both the reactions are catalyzed by an enzyme called the carbonic anhydrase. After the formation of hemoglobinic acid, that is carbonate ions plus hemoglobin, the chloride ion it diffuses from plasma into the erythrocytes to maintain the ionic balance. This neutrality is maintained electrochemically and this is called as chloride shift. Chloride ions combine with the potassium to form KCl in the RBCs. Okay, and hydrogen carbonate ions in the plasma, it combines with Na plus to form sodium hydrogen carbonate. Okay. As carbonic acid, about 7% of the CO2 is carried in a dissolved state. This is just the summary. And as Carbohaemoglobin, about 20 to 25% of CO2 is transported by hemoglobin as Carbohaemoglobin. Okay, when PaCO2 is high and PO2 is low in the tissue, more binding of CO2 occurs, whereas when the PCO2 is low and PO2 is high in the alveoli, dissociation of CO2 from Carbohaemoglobin takes place. Okay, this is how it goes. At the tissue site, if we see, then always partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high due to catabolism, and so carbon dioxide it diffuses into blood and forms HCO3 minus and H plus. But at the alveolar site, as you can see, this is the alveolar site where the partial pressure of CO2 is low, so the reaction proceeds in opposite direction. It leads to formation of CO2 and H2O. Okay. Now come to the regulation of respiration. There are three respiratory centers. One is respiratory rhythm center, pneumotoxic center, and the chemosensitive area. Okay, this is the respiratory center. This is the pneumotaxic area. This is apnostics area, and this is the midbrain. And this is pons, medulla, spinal cord. These are the inspiratory and the expiratory areas, which is controlled by medulla, of course. So this was the sagittal section of brainstem. Okay. Now, the respiratory centers, there are, as I've told you, that respiratory rhythm center, which is inspiratory, and the expiratory center, which is located in the medulla oblongata. As you can see, these two are the inspiratory and the expiratory area, which is controlled by medullary rhythmicity area, and it regulates normal functioning of inspiration and expiration. Okay. Now come to the pneumotaxic center. It is located in the pons. This is the pneumotaxic center, which is situated in the pons. That moderates function of respiratory rhythm center. Neural signal from this center, it reduces the duration of inspiration, and thereby it alters the respiratory rate. Okay, and now comes the chemosensitive area, which is adjacent to rhythmic center. and it increases in the concentration of CO2 and H+. This activates the center, which in turn signals the rhythm center. Okay. So this was all about the gaseous exchange. In my next section of my presentation, we'll be studying about the disorders of respiratory system. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Edupedia Word videos.